Finance, Tito Mboweni will have to do a fine balancing act when he presents his medium-term budget review to Parliament on Wednesday. He's facing a tax shortfall as well as major expenses from state-owned enterprises and other projects. How will he pull it off? Ropiwa Madzena is joining us now from ENC's Money Desk to unpack some of these challenges. Ropiwa, good morning and thank you very much for your time. I mean, if you were Tito Mboweni, it's difficult to please everybody. I mean, where would you think he should focus on?
So this is something that he alluded to in his economic plan, focusing on the major drivers of the economy, kind of taking a step back and looking at those drivers, things that grew the economy and ploughing investment into those. So there's been speak of agriculture, fixing the power industry, which means re-looking at Eskom's, the way that it stands at the moment, and then going forward, how it will be able to operate, whether it should be separated or not. And also focusing on the revenue collector. So we've seen by the SARS Commissioner now, Edward Kieswetter, focusing quite a bit on cleaning up from the previous regime and trying to rebuild confidence in the revenue collector so that we can stop the shortfall. So those are three big things that if I were the finance minister would be focusing on.
So three big posts. Let's start with one of them, Eskom. We know government has announced, the president has announced last year already, they want to unbundle Eskom. We're still waiting for details of how that's going to be playing itself out. Meanwhile, they're getting these bailouts. We saw a 59 billion rand bailout announced in Parliament last week, but we're still waiting to see exactly. Should we expect, it is a medium-term budget, some indication of how that unbundling is going to be taking place?
Exactly, Bradan, and that's what ratings agencies like Moody's are going to be looking at, some form of direction in terms of government's plan for Eskom. So since February this year, when he delivered the budget speech, there has been talk of this grand plan or strategy to turn Eskom around. And what we've seen over the months preceding that is that there hasn't really been anything that's come out, and the likes of Standard & Poor's as well as Moody's have said, we're waiting for this plan. Potential investors as well saying, we're waiting for the plan. Where is it going to come, or when is it going to come rather? And that's what's going to be watched very closely. Some form of direction that government is planning on taking when it comes to fixing Eskom.
Well, if you look at revenue collection, there's a deficit. And I'm sure people like Moody's and others will be watching about what he's going to be saying about government spending. You can't have a spiraling government spending when you can't collect enough and you are dishing out bailouts.
Yeah, this is a difficult one because it's anticipated that there'll be a 6% increase in deficit in terms of the country's fiscus in this particular period. So this is a big problem for the ratings agencies, and a big one, as you mentioned earlier, is the Eskom bailouts. The problem, though, is that SARS is unable to collect just from the taxpayer. There's a catch-22 that's happening here. You've got companies like Pick n Pay CEO just last week saying that there needs to be more tax incentives for big corporates in South Africa so that they can operate easier. At the same time, you need to be collecting as much revenue as you can. And with an anticipated 50 to 60 billion rand in shortfall from SARS in this financial period, it's going to be very tough to see if the minister can find a balancing act to garner that revenue that the country so much needs.
And then let's talk about these other state-owned enterprises, okay, because they are in the picture. I mean, the likes of SAA, government has been looking for a strategic equity partner there, and people are saying, but sell this STEM airline and focus the money elsewhere. As an example, I mean, there are others which are underperforming, and Tito Mboweni himself has said that maybe it is time for those that are not really helping government to achieve its public mandate must be sold.
That's right. If you're not able to provide the services that you are made to be providing, you need to go, and he's been very clear on that. Unfortunately,
could he give an indication in the medium-term budget?
He may. Unfortunately, though, as you would have seen 2 or so weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, there's a bit of pushback in terms of the direction that the minister wants to take. Some factionalism within the ruling party really affecting the way government is meant to be running. But the president is in line with some of the reforms that are looking to be put into place, talking about the equity partner, bringing the likes of Ethiopian Airways as well as other potential investors to come buy a little bit of some of these state-owned entities, in this particular case SAA, to help it garner the break-even point that it wants to reach in 2021. 2021. But it's, of course, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit of a catch-22 given the divided viewpoints in which to move forward.
Okay, it's 48 hours to go, plus minus. It will be in the afternoon on Wednesday before we actually hear how he's going to do his balancing act. And we saw him tweeting pictures at the weekend of the team meeting, finalizing their preparations. As Tito Mboweni and his team are finalizing their preps, what else, just very briefly, do you think should really be top of mind to make sure that out of Wednesday we can see, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel? Right,
so light at the end of the tunnel. We need a little bit of a clear plan when it comes to Eskom. The allocations in terms of expenditure, we need to see where the money has been going. Has it been going to SME development? We know that 90% of small businesses provide employment in the country. Has there been enough investment into SMEs? And then a third and very important one, Bradan, is infrastructure spend. That is one of the biggest things that contribute to the growth of the economy, and unfortunately we haven't been spending enough on infrastructure, so some clarity around the direction government plans to take on that will be very welcome by various watchers globally who want to be ploughing into the country.
Thank you very much, Rupio, for your insights as usual. Rupio Madzena from ENCA's Money Desk, as we begin to look ahead at Tito Mboweni's medium-term budget speech that's